Hello, welcome to Sound Bites, podcast from the Daily Memphian. I'm your host, Holly Whitfield, Digital Director. I am here with Daily Memphian food writer, the keeper of the $10 deal series, Josh Carlucci. This week we'll talk about Josh. He's been traveling the world a little bit. We also worked together on a pizza guide last year, and he's done a lot of other work for the Daily Memphian. We're going to talk about all of that today, so thank you for tuning in. Please know that Sound Bites is the Daily Memphian's weekly food, drink, and dining podcast. Tune in on WYXR radio every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, etc. If you found a good podcast keeper app, please let me know. I'm looking for one. Or you can listen to Soundbites at dailymemphian.com. If you're listening right now on WYXR, up next you can hear Daily Memphian CEO Eric Barnes on his Sidebar podcast. It's about Memphis arts and culture. There's a different great guest every week. Be sure that you tune in. But let's go ahead and get started with Josh Carlucci. He's a food writer, he's a traveler, trained chef, all of the above. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I was trying not to smile during that intro. That was so illustrious. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Good. We like to have fun here on the Sound Bites Daily Memphian Food, Drink, and Dining podcast. Okay. Tell us, in your own words, your bio. If people are listening, though, let me interject this quickly before I let you answer. If people are longtime Soundbites listeners, they might have heard Josh talk with Chris Harrington on some previous episodes last year. But if you haven't caught up, we're going to let Josh tell us his whole deal and what he likes to write for the Daily Memphian.
Yeah, for sure. Man, it's been a minute now that I've been with the Daily Memphian. So the Daily Memphian was actually my first opportunity at food writing, which was cool. I started here a couple months after I moved in 2022. I came here for graduate school to get my MFA. And I actually did the journalism internship with El Perry,
yes,
which was awesome. And through that, I kind of linked up with Jennifer Biggs and I was like, hey, I know how to cook and I used to work in restaurants and I want to be a food writer. Could you tell me what you know? And so she, kind of put me on some low stakes stuff. One being my first $10 deal, which I want to talk about more because I have a lot of fond memories of that $10 deal. But so since then, things just kind of started snowballing, I guess. Started writing for Edible Memphis, which I still do. Eventually picked up some contracts with Southern Living, Eating Well. So I write for them. And very recently, I just got a new job, actually. I'm going to be the full-time staff writer for Star Chefs, which is a food mag based in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So very excited about that, but I'll continue freelancing as well.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know the journeys that we take as writers are sometimes windy, so that's awesome. I love that. I was going to talk about your traveling because you do a ton of traveling, and it's great, but I think that intro has inspired me. Let's go ahead and talk about your first $10 deal that you did when you were working with Jennifer Biggs. If you don't know, every week the Daily Memphian publishes a $10 deal, which I know is getting harder and harder to find with whatever's going on with food and restaurant prices. But it's basically, what can $10 get you in the city of Memphis that's delicious, that's good? Sometimes it's not exactly $10, or sometimes it's like, oh, this part of it's $10, but something more or less that you can get is more or less. But exactly. Look, wordsmith here. But you've been doing this since 2023. Did I do that math right? So that's a lot of $10 deals.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said the first one you have fond memories, or the beginnings of your time writing these has given you.
Yeah.
Yes. Tell us a story.
So my first one, I was trying to pitch a bunch of different stuff to Jennifer. She was like, nope, did that. And then I was like, okay, what about Ernestine and Hazel's? Their burger. And she was like, yeah, that sounds great. And that, I was still really new to Memphis, didn't really know anything, heard a lot about this bar. And then that was my first time at Ernestine and Hazel's. I also had no idea how the burger was going to be. It was an amazing burger. So I think it was like exactly $10, something like that. So it was kind of the perfect $10 deal.
Soul burger.
Yeah, the soul burger. It's very basic burger. I mean, it's like a frozen patty, like nothing crazy or special about that. But like they have this soul sauce, which is like a Worcestershire, like barbecue-esque sauce with like caramelized onions. And it's super delicious. I mean, it's like the perfect beer drinking burger at a dive bar, I can't really think of any other way to describe it except that it feels like gritty and nostalgia and just like really like disgustingly comforting.
You want it. Yeah.
You want it. Yeah. And it's also, I mean, I don't know. I have a weird thing about round numbers, especially when it comes to the $10 deals, because I'm reminded by some of my readers that what I have gotten was not exactly $10. And while that is true, I do love to get an exact $10 deal sometimes. So yeah, it's just, the first one, it was great.
That's a really strong start. I mean, Memphians were probably like, whoa, you chose the soul burger.
I was trying to impress,
Yeah.
I wanted them to be like, this guy knows what's up, which I did not know what's up, but I was trying my best.
I mean, I think though, and I'm a little bit biased here because a million years ago, when I moved here, I also had that perspective of being like a newcomer and then like writing about Memphis food as someone who wasn't from here and wasn't like born here and raised here. People are like, what do they know? So I do think that perspective is really valuable though, because not only can it sometimes be like, well, I don't know about this because this is how they do it everywhere else. And like, what could we improve? Could we not? Or, maybe it doesn't hit the mark every time, but it can also show Memphians that like, wow, this is really good. Like I've not been from here. I'm not biased on the soul burger. Like if you'd had it and you'd been like, ugh, I don't know what these people are talking about at Ernestine and Hazel's. But you liked it. You loved it. You appreciated it. And you appreciated how much it cost. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think you bring up a good point of like being an outsider coming into Memphis, which can be kind of, quite an insular city sometimes. And at first it was like very intimidating to be like, I'm going to tell all these people who have lived here their whole lives about the food scene here. But, I think Memphis is a very like accepting and welcoming place. So that was very immediate right off the bat. It seemed like people liked what I was writing. And it was also such a blessing to like be able to start food writing in Memphis because I had, I was like coming to this place for grad school, having never been, having no idea like what the food scene was like. You never really hear about Memphis's food scene outside of Memphis. But then I got here and I started writing about it. And in doing so and like basically cataloging, all these restaurants that I've been to and want to try like in my Google Maps, and we can get to that later. I like was able to find like, oh my God, this city has such an incredible food scene and nobody knows about it. I want to tell like the whole world about it. So I don't know. It's like a beautiful thing, to find something really unexpected, in a place that you are going to live for at least the next 3 years.
No, it's a big job to come in new and tell people, what you think about their quote unquote food. But I find if you stick at it for at least a little bit of time, people will listen. Okay, so you mentioned your Google Maps. This is something that Daily Memphian CEO Eric Barnes and I talked about on the last episode of Soundbites, which is how do you figure out where you're going to eat when you travel? Totally respect the type of vacation or trip where you go and you're just like, I need sustenance. It doesn't matter where I'm eating. But sometimes I feel like the two of us, maybe the three of us, Natalie, Van Gundy over here, we travel to eat. So how do you find out where you're going to go? How do you plan your restaurants? What do you use? Like I had talked about how I use Instagram as a starting point and then the rest of the internet. Eric said that he uses Apple Maps. So there's that. What's your take?
That's a great question. So I think it really depends exactly where I'm going. If I'm in the States, definitely. Oh, I tend to start with Instagram kind of just across the board as well. I follow a lot of restaurant accounts that in cities that I've been in, cities that I haven't been that I just want to try. And then I just like try to save them either like on Instagram or, so I'm a Google Maps guy.
Okay.
And I have like organized lists in my Google Maps, for different cities. If I know the city really well and I have like a ton in that city, then I'll organize them like by cuisine. Like I do that with like New York. But yeah, so like, anyway, like I try to do like some ample research online on the internet, like with, Instagram. So James Beard, like, nominees, semifinalists and stuff like that. I do Eater. Thrillist used to be kind of like, bigger than it was.
Yeah.
And like now it's okay, but I'll still use it here and there. And I mean, sometimes like, I'm not ashamed to say it. I'll just like Google like best restaurants right now, like in
you never know.
City. You
Something
never know.
really good could come up. Yeah.
100%. Especially like if I'm going to a place kind of last minute, like haven't done a lot of research. I'm like, I have like, 2 or 3 days in that city. Like I need to know where to eat. Right. I also, try to keep a catalog in the back of my mind of like, who do I know who's like lived in the city or like lives here or like this random friend of a friend, I need to hit them up. That kind of thing. So I guess I try to like use my octopus tentacles to tap on, a bunch of different people and things. Does that answer your question?
It does. I think that's probably how, I'm assuming you're a millennial. We're pretty close.
Yeah. Last year, millennial, actually. 96.
There you go. I think a lot of millennials just kind of like, I look at the internet and like, I know what sites are good and I can immediately tell if they're probably not so good. And so then at some point I've created myself an amalgamation of my list combined with that personal network. I think that's really good. But you have done some traveling recently, South America. Tell us about where you went, what you did, and what you ate. You told me you ate something that you called the goop.
Okay, wait.
But start at the beginning.
All right. So the goop was actually in Colombia in 2023.
Okay.
Which is basically like this sort of wafer cracker. It's kind of like communion cracker thin and texture, which is strange. But anyway, it has dulce de leche, which like South Americans like across the board kind of love dulce de leche. So it's like this like dulce de leche cracker.
If you don't know what dulce de leche is, tell us.
Yeah, it's like caramel sauce, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it like the boiled condensed milk thing? Is that what it is?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It's like caramel, like whisked with like, condensed milk. So it's like sweeter,
Yes.
And runnier. But anyway, but it does translate into, where I just went, which was Patagonia. So that's a geographical region in the cone of South America at the very end, closest to Antarctica. And it's made up by part of Argentina and part of Chile. So I was there for like 5 weeks. I was there over the holidays.
Amazing.
It was beautiful. I got engaged.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Yay.
I went to my friend's second wedding.
Okay.
She actually got married here in Memphis and I officiated the wedding. And then I went to her Catholic wedding because her husband is like from this small town on the coast in northern Patagonia in Argentina.
Second wedding, but like same guy, same marriage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I figured, but I just wanted
That's
to be
a good question, and no one's ever asked me that. But yeah, that would be interesting.
I was like, what a distinction he's making. Got it. Her second celebration of her marriage, the wedding.
Yeah, and it was lovely.
Yes.
It was beautiful. Shout out to me and Maxie. But yeah, so did a lot of eating there. This was actually the first trip my fiance and I did that wasn't food centered exactly. So usually when we travel, we're both like, obviously really into food. And so we kind of seek out places that are known for their food, like, Mexico City, Vietnam, whatever, right?
Yes.
So this was like the first of its kind where we were really, prioritizing something different, which was hiking and nature, which was great. But the food was not as incredible as some other places that I've been, just because like, Chile and Argentina aren't necessarily like known internationally for its food in like the way that, like Italy is or something, right?
Sure.
But there is really good food. Namely, the sort of asado or like grilling culture. Argentina specifically has these restaurants called parrillas, Parrilla, which is basically this like giant open fire grill. Like, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, it's basically like their version of barbecue.
Yes.
But they do a lot of lamb, a lot of cow. They don't really eat as much pork, with the exception of making like chorizo and other sausages, blood sausage. But I mean, it was like some of the best lamb I've ever had. Just like, you know, you walk in and they're like roasting like a whole lamb, like butterflied open, like over coals, you know, and it kind of sticks out diagonally. It's like the craziest thing to look at. And you just like walk up to the dude and you're like, hey, I want a lamb rib, you know, and you get this giant lamb rib on the plate. And it's like fall apart tender. It's really good.
Are they like, here's some sauce, or are they like,
Yeah.
we don't even bother?
So they do like mostly chimichurri, which is like,
that's one of my favorites. I love that green sauce.
If you don't know what chimichurri is, it's basically like an oil-based mixture of parsley and garlic, and depending on where you are, like, you know, they'll add different things, horseradish, cilantro. But yeah,
just good stuff.
It's good stuff. It's very fresh. Really complements, you know, like the fattiness of the meat. What was else I was saying? Oh yeah. We were in Ushuaia, which is like one of the southernmost cities in the world. And in Ushuaia, Argentina, they have this basically this type of king crab. It's like the species of king crab called a centolla. And it looks like a giant spider. It's like the craziest thing. And
okay.
Everybody,
it sounds scary, honestly.
It looks kind of scary. They have them in like tanks in these restaurants. And we went to this one restaurant, which was like the only Chinese restaurant there. And it's like a Chinese buffet / they sell this centolla.
Okay.
And so we were like, hey, we want this centolla, like, you know. But we saw these like Chinese guys eating it this way that no one else was eating it, which was like in this ginger scallion sauce. And we were trying to like explain to the staff that we wanted it that way and like not the white person way, which was just like, you know, boiled and then served with melted butter.
Right.
And they didn't really speak that great of English. So I was like trying to explain in Spanish that we wanted it this way. And anyway, I ended up pointing a lot and then we got it and it was like delicious.
And they did it
perfectly.
Yes.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it was like not cheap.
Sure.
But I mean, for like a whole king crab, it was like cheaper than you'd get in the States. You know, it was like $100. Yeah, it was great.
That sounds like a really adventurous trip.
It was.
Not just the getting engaged part. Congrats again, but like all the good eats.
Yeah.
And good traveling. So let's go back to the $10 deal.
Yeah, let's do it.
Do you have, okay, so we were trying to figure this out, but we couldn't because we are writers, not mathematicians, and we don't know how many $10 deals articles that you've written, but it's in the many of dozens. It's over 50. It's probably like 75 or 80 at this point. Maybe we'll figure it out later. But do you have some that stick out to you in any way? Maybe they're your favorite. Maybe you had to do something crazy to get them or find them. Good backstory.
Yeah.
We need some $10 deal lore.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been so many that, you know, as the weeks roll by, they enter my head and then they exit sometimes. But I was looking back here on the Daily Memphian app. And
we have an app every time.
Yeah, I love the app. The first one that kind of popped up here was, and I feel like I talk about this all the time, but I just love it so much. The Pambazo at Garibaldi, South Korea. And I can't remember if I talked about that with Chris already. I feel like I did, but
do it again. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so a Pambazo is this type of torta, which a torta is a Mexican sandwich. And they use a particular type of bread called telera bread. It's kind of like a French roll. But the Pambazo is like this very, very notably different torta. So it's not just like the bread and meat and cheese and everything else, but it is all of those things. But then they take the sandwich and they dunk it in this guajillo chili sauce, and then they grill it. So it turns like soggy and then like crispy. And then inside they have like chorizo and potatoes. So it's like breakfast vibes. They have like, that crumbly, like fresh cheese.
Yes.
Like cotija cheese and refried beans. And it's incredible. It like shouldn't work, you know, because it seems really weird to like dunk a sandwich in a bunch of sauce. But I guess, I don't know. Think about like the, what's that Chicago sandwich? The Italian beef.
Yeah.
Right.
To me, I'm thinking of like a New Orleans roast beef po' boy that you dip in jus. But then what if you also put it on a griddle?
On a griddle.
Yes.
Yeah. It's cool. So it's like this weird texture. Not weird in a bad way, like weird in a really good way. You wouldn't expect it, the bread absorbs all of the sauce and then it gets crispy again and it's super delicious. So
where is that? You said it's that.
It is. So Tuckeria Garibaldi is on Knights Arnold in Hickory Hill, I believe.
Not to be confused with Garibaldi's Pizza.
Right. Two very different things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Not unrelated, I believe.
Yes.
Do not go to Garibaldi's and ask for this item.
No.
I feel like the East Memphis Garibaldi's, they would try. They'd be like, we can try it. They're so nice. But they couldn't.
Yeah,
they would try, but
sweet.
they couldn't.
Yeah. So it's called a Pombazo. Great in the morning if you like want a gigantic breakfast and to feel lethargic the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
They also have great
do.
coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, It's a nice place to just hang out. It feels like a little Mexican diner. It's nice.
That sounds amazing. Any other $10 deal pieces of lore or other top ones?
So, I have a background story thing, but it's not about a $10 deal.
Yeah, go for it.
Or do you want to talk about the $10 deals?
Let's hear the background story because I feel like sometimes people are very it's totally fine. You're scrolling on social media or your internet or your inbox and you see the stories and you read them or you see the headlines and you read them, but you don't necessarily think about like what all went into making them happen. Which is why sometimes you comment things like, "Why didn't you ask this?" And it's like, "Well, we did, but we couldn't get an answer." Okay, that's my little side spiel, but I'm always interested in like how you got the story.
Yeah. So I did this story maybe like 2 years ago now. Mm-hmm. It's called To Memphis from Mexico. Mm-hmm. And it was basically about the growing number of taquerias and Mexican restaurants in Memphis. And so it was this story that I think Mary Casciola pitched to me. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of took it and ran with it to see where it would go. And it turned into this like really cool piece that like I wrote and researched, but then we both collaborated on making this cool map. And I'll talk about that in a second. But basically, I learned a lot from writing the story, which is like one of my favorite things about local journalism is that you just like learn so much sometimes about like a very niche or specific thing. This one being, how much the Hispanic, specifically Mexican population in Memphis has grown since the 1990s and why. So I reached out to this, at the time, brand new, like little taco truck, that was out on, in Cordova. Mm-hmm. And the kid who was running it was like, 17 years old, just graduated high school, was running it with his parents, like working every day. And they were just starting to, see some success from it. And it was, kind of his story about, how he worked all his way through middle school and high school with his parents and how his parents came from this like tiny little village in Mexico to do this and live their dream. And how that was basically like a micro example of the greater, idea here, which is that, a lot of families are moving to Memphis from Mexico because it's one of the few cities, like major cities in the States that is still like relatively cheap, compared to like other previous cities that, a lot of Mexican immigrants moved. And because of that, they're bringing like their culture and their food. And so like, there's like this explosion of really, really good Mexican food in Memphis, which being from like California did totally not expect that it would, be so delicious and so regional, right? Like you have food from Sinaloa, like food from Michoacan, like all these like very specific regional Mexican cuisines. And
beyond like a Tex-Mex or
exactly. Yeah. And so I think that's like kind of a sign of like how you have like so much saturation that there is like this competition where, different restaurants like need to be diversifying and like being very specific in the cuisine that they're offering. And then I also got to talk to the executive director of Latino Memphis, and he like talks to me about, you know, why it is that Mexican families are like choosing a city like Memphis, and like how, you know, the restaurant boom is a sign of like success. And it's like it was like a really beautiful thing to be able to write, and I think now kind of reflect on in light of, you know, what's going on in the world. And
absolutely,
it's you know, it's a good reminder like how much beauty and culture is like brought to Memphis, like from our immigrant population. So that was awesome.
And you made a map.
Yeah. And so we made a map. And so after I wrote it, I turned it in, and Mary Casciola, who's my editor, she was like, okay, we should, you know, make this map of all of the taquerias we can think of. So we kind of both went in, and maybe Chris did too or something.
I remember this. So it has to be like within the last 2 years.
Yeah, it was. It was. And so we made this like a Google Maps list that was like HTML threaded into the story. And I just like love looking at that map because it's so sad.
Yeah.
I'm like a maps guy. So it was like so satisfying to look at, like, oh my God, here's like all these little blips of all these different taquerias and taco trucks like all over the city. And when you look at it, you're like, wow, there's so much good Mexican food in Memphis. And I still actually will go back to that map and like add in new stuff as I find it. Which is cool. So it's always growing. If you go find that story, you can go find the little map of Mexican in Memphis if you ever like are having a hankering.
If you are listening on WYXR, just go to dailymemphian.com and find this story, and I'll link to it. Story about Josh Carlucci and Soundbites podcast. We'll definitely give that map a shout out on social media as well. There's one last thing I want to talk to you about, which is a project that you and I both contributed to last spring in 2024, which was, and I quote, okay, this is what you said about it. I had some very funny renditions of pizza in Memphis. No shade. I also had some funny renditions of pizza in Memphis because you and I, Josh, and Chris Harrington we did create a Memphis pizza guide. And I will be the first to say, like, Memphis is not known for its pizza necessarily. There's a Memphis style pizza that Chris Harrington has written about several times, but it's not, like, it's just not our number one thing. But people are looking for good pizza, and they're looking for different styles of pizza. And that's why we decided to have this guide. And I don't know how many places you ate at. I ate at like 10 plus pizza places. I think you ate close to that many. There's a 3-part pizza guide. I think we organized it into like chains and Memphis style and slice joints where you can just get a slice. Mm-hmm. But one thing that I'm sure that we left off several, and as we were joking about just a moment ago, like there were probably some that we included like in the spirit of completionism that maybe we didn't have to include. And some didn't even make it to the guide. I'll go ahead and say that there's some stuff behind the scenes. So we're trying to bring you as listeners and readers the best thing. But we left off one. I think it was like a pretty bad omission. But you have attempted to make up for it in your most recent-ish $10 deal, which was Isabella's Pizza in Bartlett. A, tell us a little bit about Isabella's, and B, would love just any additional thoughts you had on the very labor-intensive pizza guide. Yeah.
So I mentioned at the beginning of the pod that I also write for Edible Memphis. So if you haven't, like, Edible Memphis, Stacy Greenberg is the editor of it, and she has this weekly newsletter called Where Should I Eat? And I read it every week. I love it. And so I always like find stuff that, you know, she like gets to before me, and I love her for that. So Isabella's was one of them, and she was like, this is super good. And I saw a picture of it, and I have this weird, I wasn't going to call it a talent, but I'll call it a talent. I have this weird talent with pizza where like I look at a picture of it and I can tell if it's good or bad.
Sure.
I'd say like I'm 90% accurate. I saw a picture of it and I was like, that looks really good. I got to go try it. And I heard they had like a vodka slice. If you don't know what vodka sauce is, it's basically tomato sauce with heavy cream and like a little vodka that cooks out. So I went.
You're not just Yeah, it's not just Grey Goose
No.
on a pizza.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody thinks that, but
That would
just
be-
in case.
Yeah, that would not be cost effective either. So anyway, I drove out to Bartlett last week, and I got a slice of the vodka. I got a slice of the pepperoni, and I got a stromboli, which I'm not usually a stromboli guy because they're super heavy and intense, but I was very wowed by everything that I got. Off the bat, the vodka, I mean, it comes out, it's like perfectly triangular, gigantic piece of pizza, very New York style, perfectly foldable, which if you are a person who eats New York style pizza, you know that they fold their pizza, and it's like a big thing.
It's an essential part of the experience.
Yeah. And I mean, everything about it was just like spot on. The sauce was delicious, perfectly salted, not too creamy, like not too acidic or tomatoey. The dough like was the perfect texture. Crust was awesome. Ratio was like, I mean, it was like on point, it was awesome pizza. And I was just so wowed because, I mean, in the pizza guide, I had some like pretty good pizza.
Yeah.
A couple that I was like, yeah, this is good. I had some pretty mediocre pizza. Sure. But like nothing I would say was like on the level of like New York City's pizza because, I mean, New York has always had that's their thing.
Yes.
This was like New York City level pizza. And I was really happy about that because everybody says like New York does pizza and bagels really well because of their water. Memphis's water is arguably better than New York. So we should have really good bagels, which we do, like, the Hive.
Yes.
But we should have like even better pizza. So like seeing this pizza, I was like, man, this is making really good use of Memphis water for baking. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was really lovely. Pepperoni was really good as well. Stromboli, if you're into that, really good, like super soft and gooey. But I mean, otherwise on the pizza guide, we left out Izzy and Adams, which was only because they closed right after I went there, which I had no idea was happening. And I was super sad about because if you like Chicago style pizza, I was going to say you should go, but you can't. It's really sad. But like it was really, really good. It was like delicious Chicago deep dish. And also there's this place in Midtown, I think on Madison called Slice of Soul, which was like one of my favorites. Yes. Very like unexpected. I walked in and I was like, this is like a club. What is going on? And, there's like a bar and like we were the only people in there. And I was like, I have no idea what this is. And we ordered the pizza and like I just had this like delicious barbecue chicken pizza. And I was like, man, this is awesome. It's just so unexpected and cool. And so,
Maybe we need to make some additions to the guide.
Yeah, some addendum to the pizza guide for sure.
I think so. Josh, thank you so much. This has been really fun talking about all these things to eat, all these Memphis things. We really appreciate you bringing us some good deals every week to eat. That is all the time we have on this episode of Sound Bites. You can tune into this podcast from the Daily Memphian on WYXR every Thursday at 11. Listen wherever you get your podcasts. You know where to find it. Read a little bit about it and listen also right on our website at dailymemphian.com. Thank you, Josh, so much. Congratulations on the job, the engagement, and all the stuff you get to eat. And I'll talk to y'all next time.